the story of the Form's girl reporter who conquered Hollywood, but never forgot the folks at home. Trailblazing journalist Muriel Babcock started her journalism career selling Saturday Evening Posts as a child in Wahpeton, North Dakota, and she'd end it being one of the most powerful editors in the business. I'm Tracy Briggs. Welcome to Back Then. This week's podcast is brought to you by Discover Jamestown. To learn more, go to discoverjamestownnd.com. How have I been an employee of Form Communications for more than 30 years and not have known about this awesome former employee? Muriel Babcock worked for the Form 100 years ago and died the very year I became a full-time employee here. So, obviously, for those reasons, I never got the chance to run into her in the break room or anything. Man, I wish I had. Instead, I had to learn of her story through the Form's archives. The weathered old newsprint tells the story of a trailblazing, driven young woman who could have very easily been dismissed in the male-dominated world of news. Instead, she decided she'd go ahead and conquer it. So, who was Muriel Babcock? She was a Form staff writer in the 1920s before becoming one of Hollywood's most important journalists. Now, we've all seen those movie magazines from the 20s and 30s dishing the dirt on the biggest stars of the day. Well, Babcock was the chief disher-outer. She interviewed and shared news about the biggest stars of the day, including this priceless nugget from June 17, 1934. This is what she wrote. It was a hot and hectic day for fan worship in Hollywood last Sunday. Clark Gable almost had his pants torn off by a crowd of historical fans at the Grand Central Airport. Oh dear. But before all of that excitement, she was the girl reporter from Wahpeton, North Dakota, in a 1920s smoke-filled newsroom full of men. And by the way, when I say girl reporter, I'm not calling her that. That is what the people back then called her. So let's get that straight. Babcock was born March 19, 1900 in Minneapolis. She grew up in Wahpeton, where her father worked at an implement dealership. Early on, she was hooked on news, selling the Saturday Evening Post as a child and setting up her own newsstand in high school. She attended the University of North Dakota, but also worked as a secretary to Fargo Forum publisher Norman B. Black, which eventually led to a job as a staff writer at the paper. She also was a correspondent for the Grand Forks Herald. She wrote human interest stories and was in charge of the movie column. By 1923, she had moved to California to attend the University of California and work for the San Francisco Examiner. By the late 1920s, she moved south to Hollywood, where her career really took off. When she first got to Southern California, she wrote movie columns for the Los Angeles Times and the Los Angeles Examiner. She also became one of the first female reporters to cover a major sporting event when the 1932 Olympic Games came to Los Angeles. Her favorite athlete? Babe Diedrichson, who she said was, quote, a whole show in herself, end quote. More honors, accolades, and promotions followed. By 1939, she had been named the editor of the #1 movie magazine in the country. When Babcock received the major promotion to become editor of Picture Play, which was the nation's top movie magazine, the Form's headline read, quote, once lanky blonde Form reporter, now editor of National Movie Magazine, end quote. The editor wrote of her, quite a girl, yes sir, quite a girl, commenting on her tall and boyish figure. Did these cigar-smoking newsmen ever ask themselves what her height, hair color, and figure had to do with her accomplishments as a journalist? Well, so far in my extensive archival research, I've never found a headline that read, short, fat, brown-haired man promoted. But, I'll keep looking. When she climbed the corporate ladder even higher by being named executive editor of 4 different magazines, a headline profiling Babcock proclaimed, Lady editorship is job sans glamour to Miss Babcock. So here's a question. Is a lady editorship different than a regular one? Did she smoke Virginia Slim cigarettes behind a pink typewriter while reminding her male colleagues to quit calling her honey? Who knows? But by all accounts, Babcock was a big shot. But she never seemed to forget her roots. She did a few interviews over the years with Form reporters, often asking them to fill her in on what was going on with the folks back home. One of my favorite finds was a letter Babcock wrote to Roy Johnson at the Form. It was dated February 23rd, 1939. What's so cool about it is it's actually written on sort of a powder blue picture play letterhead paper. It's the authentic letter from her, and it's just so cool to see. She talks about her reporting philosophy. She says people like to read about people, and she kind of went on and told stories about how you want to find out where glamour girl and glamour boy live, and you want to find out about their children and their hobbies, and less so about when is my movie going to open and the specifics like that. So, but the very best part of the letter was her opening paragraph, which I think helps you get a really good feel for what her early days at the Forum were like. Here's what she said. Dear Roy, I surely do remember the old AP room and how I used to snitch cigarettes. You may be interested in knowing that now I'm a big girl and all grown up. I don't like the taste of cigarettes and smoke very rarely. Into her later years, Babcock extended her reach into publishing, even editing a book about the Kennedy family in 1962. 3 years later, in 1965, Babcock retired from her big shot career. She died in Long Island, New York in 1988, survived by many nieces and nephews, and at least one journalist at today's Forum who'd give anything to have shared a cup of coffee with her in the break room. Special thanks to Don Person, who first tipped me off about Muriel Babcock. Thanks for listening to this week's Back Then with Tracy Briggs. Again, thanks to our sponsor, Discover Jamestown. To learn more, go to discoverjamestownnd.com. Forum Communications is proud to be part of The Trust Project. Learn more at thetrustproject.org.